Hey, it's Robert Clickybeard, the host of the Commercial Landscaper podcast. These podcasts challenge you to grow as a leader, to stretch yourself beyond your comfort zone, and to 10x your company. I really encourage you to enjoy the show, share it with teammates, fellow business owners, and subscribe. That helps us grow our community. Hi, this is Robert Clickybeard with the Commercial Landscaper podcast. I'm really excited today to be joined by Joe Iafigliola. Joe, good to see you.
Great to see you too, Robert.
Did I pronounce your name okay there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I love your name, Italian.
Yes, that's right.
Cool.
Although I don't look it, that's how it works some ways.
I know. What would that be? Like a dark hair?
Typically,
skin?
I guess Northern Italians kind of look like me, but yeah,
Right.
A little bit darker complexion typically.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining this show today. I'd love the audience just to talk, to hear a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started a company about 5 years ago to support landscapers with some of their back office and other administrative tasks. So my background, I worked at a couple big companies, Procter & Gamble, Newell Rubbermaid, and then in the supply chain logistics field with a company called McMaster Car Supply Company. And then after that, I began working at Safeguard Properties, which is a mortgage field services firm. In that firm, we did a lot of work at properties where there was no occupant. And because of that, there's no built-in quality check. So you don't really know if somebody cut the grass, if they patched the roof, if they did other tasks that we had to do to take care of these homes. And so we would use hundreds and hundreds of people to validate photos and confirm that the work that was billed for was properly documented and completed. And at some point, it just got overwhelming. We were doing, hundreds of thousands of activities a month, and we really needed help. And so we went down and I led an offshoring sourcing project to find other places where we could get help to complete this work. And so over the years, we built strong relationships with service centers across the world, kind of built that up. And then fast forward, the folks who own Safeguard bought a commercial landscaper. And as part of that purchase, they asked me to take a look and help figure out which ERP system we should use. So I assisted them with that. And as part of that ERP, we figured out ways we could combine certain departments, whether that was accounts receivable, lead generation, estimating, being a technical support, password changes and things like that. All tasks that are important to do, but don't necessarily add direct value to the client or our support items where you just want to be cost efficient. We helped that company eventually centralize and do about 20 different roles offshore. And so from that experience, we started Process Smart. We were fortunate enough to work with some really good partners at Aspire, helped onboard 50 or 60 companies by doing contract entry, and then began supporting people in those services. Some people call it a VA, like a virtual assistant. And we definitely do support that, but we've also started to codify what we do into certain tasks like invoicing, collections, remittance application, or payables and purchase orders, or takeoffs, estimating and rendering, to give landscape companies a little bit firmer idea of, hey, you can purchase these services from us, not necessarily just purchase time and then, best of luck on how to deploy it, let us know, but really to kind of organize around services. And so that seems like it's been a pretty successful transition. We support dozens of clients now in the landscaping space, and our unique kind of go to market versus other companies or doing it yourself is we have experience with a number of different landscape ERPs. I mentioned Aspire, but we work with LMNs, single ops, some of the newer systems we've started to work with. We're happy to support those systems, but we also have a lot of folks who are just familiar with the landscape space, familiar with dispatching crews, understanding work tracking, understanding what an enhancement is, how you might do a takeoff, so that we have folks who are at least somewhat familiar with the space. So when a client hires us, they're just teaching us and teaching our folks about their specific way of doing business as opposed to, the whole industry. So that's kind of where we differentiate ourselves from other BPO firms. We differentiate ourselves from how a person might individually do it. I mean, you could certainly source someone yourself. I mean, it's pretty easy now on a lot of internet sites. The problem with that is if you have turnover, you're responsible for replacement. You're probably not going to find somebody who's familiar with the landscaping space. I guess you might get lucky, but very unlikely. And so you're going to be responsible for doing all that orientation. If they're sick, you're going to have to find a backup. And we kind of take all that burden away from the individual folks that are using our services. And so that kind of has become our go-to-market. So that's kind of where the genesis of the business, just on a top level, and some of the ways we're trying to serve our customers.
Why do you think people struggle, first of all, delegating tasks? And then second part of that is, a lot of people, think of, traditional way of running companies, trying to do it themselves, control, rather than looking at different options now available. I think it's fair in saying that, during that COVID period, a lot of businesses changed the way they did business. Yeah, but maybe some resisted in not doing that. So love to hear your thoughts.
Delegation is always a challenge. And really, if you think about the life cycle of a landscaping business, and I'm going to ignore the segment of landscapers where someone's purchased an already established business, because that's different. Generally, when folks have started a business, they did the work themselves. Maybe they hired a buddy to help them. They expanded onto other crews, but they have a really close personal relationship. Maybe they utilize their spouse to do some of the back office activities. Even when they added a location, they know every single customer, they know every single piece of equipment, every single truck. And then as they're successful because of hard work and their knowledge of the people and the customers, it eventually starts to get away from them where they need help. But the success of the business was built on that intimate knowledge and doing everything yourself or overseeing everything yourself. So separating and taking that next step up is a really challenging and honestly very understandably challenging task. And from what I've seen, you can very easily is like not the wrong word, but you can capably might be the better word because it's very hard. Run a 2, 3, 4, 5. I've seen $7 million landscape companies in terms of revenue where the owner pretty much is running the whole show, and they might be working 100 hours a week, but they're running the whole show. For them to let go and delegate when so much of their success was probably because they did everything themselves is really, really tough. And so, but we have to help people. And there's a lot of folks, and I know you guys do this too, but a lot of folks just help people understand that at some point you have to delegate, because a lot of those same folks, and I've heard anecdotes, I haven't done a study, but they end up making the same amount of money when they were at $3.5 million of revenue when they're at $7 million. And they don't know why. They're working twice as hard, but making the same amount of money. There's lots of reasons for that, but that's where I think the delegation is challenging. The other place where I think delegating is tough is when the person who's giving up the task is like nervous about their job. So if you have an office administrator and they feel like their job is entering contracts, sending invoices, doing paperwork, and now you're going to take that away from them, they're going to feel like their livelihood is threatened. And so where you have to be responsible as an owner is to have a really honest conversation with them and say, yes, we really appreciate all the work you've done, but we need you to get in front of customers and answer phone calls, deal with complaints, or help us with higher level tasks so that the business can be more successful and that person can make more money because they're doing more than just road tasks, but they'll have to give up some of those things. And I think that can be a challenge from a delegation standpoint as well. So delegating is not easy if you want to grow your business, whether that's top line or just profitability wise. It's something that you have to kind of embrace and get used to.
Yeah, I think we've probably both seen it where, I've had owners come to me and said, hey, I've been stuck at 5 million for 10 years. And they wonder why, they're scratching their head. But a lot of the time it's them that are the roadblock, just because of the delegation piece, or maybe who they've hired, or maybe people below them of losing, potentially losing control of their jobs. So I think 100% spot on. So how do you change that mindset? Because a lot of the time it is the mindset. They're worried about either losing control, or maybe they think if they offshore it, then there's a risk there. So how do you change that mindset? Because effectively that's what you're trying to do, correct?
I think that part of the mindset change has to come in terms of what your objectives are. I think there's another proposed person in our industry, Greg Herring, that talks about the life dividend. And I think that's part of it. So if you're one of these folks who is working 60 hours every week, I mean, that is a grind. A lot of times you'll have health issues. You're not going to have time with your family. I mean, you're making a choice. And so I think that the motivation to try can come from trying to get that life dividend back. Or if you want to just grow the business in terms of top line, bottom line, that's the other motivation. And so I think that folks, when they think about it, can get the incentive to try it. And then how do you get comfortable? Part of it, what we do is just with case studies and showing our track record. I think part of it is just trying it. We will often enter in contracts, especially with folks who are very unfamiliar with us. And it's not like a free trial, because I think that when you get something for free, you don't value it, you won't invest in it, but it's more of a try it. And if you're feeling like we're successful and on a good path with your particular business, then pay us. And if it's not, and it didn't work out, then don't. And we'll break the engagement in 30, 60 days, no hard feelings. And that's been a way where we've tried to get people comfortable with giving it a break. Because what we mostly find is when these things are successful, it's not a top-down design. It's that the people who the owner has assigned, or the owner themselves, to work with us see us successfully taking away these tasks, freeing up their time either for personal pleasure or investing in business in other ways. And organically, we start to get more and more and more tasks. And in places where we don't, in company cultures where people can't get past that sort of delegation or task assignment, it usually doesn't work out. And I try to, vet that out during the sales qualification process. But those are the instances where we generally are not successful, is when people either see their core value as producing paper or producing documents and widgets, or that they don't think that they can successfully work with people across, the globe to delegate those tasks. And it's a fair concern, but I would think that all the things we learned during COVID when so much was remote, those things should be valuable lessons that it is possible to do. It takes a little bit of a different kind of working mentality, but it's possible to share in those tasks. And then the last thing from a security standpoint, I think that's a very legitimate concern. And so where we've tried to adjust that is with ISO compliance, SOC 2 testing, and other control-based audits that you can get to just validate that data and other things are safe. One of the things that is really, I think, an important differentiator for us is that we don't retain any data. We're not accepting in files, storing them, processing, and then producing outputs. We're working within the client system. And so none of the data other than, virtually is held in our hands. And so we don't have the risk on our side of retaining the data, and the client doesn't have the risk on their side of us of having data. We're viewing it, we're in a portal, we're on a website, but we're not downloading anything. We're not consuming data to put them at risk.
Let's take a minute to thank our sponsors. Urcher is a life brand born from grit, founded by Zach Strausser. The mission is clear: to raise $1 million for the trades by supporting vocational training across North America. Urcher makes tough, smart gear built for landscaping and snow professionals who work hard outside every day in all conditions. Their apparel puts safety first, helps crews look sharp, and honors the pride in their craft. Every purchase has purpose, fueling training programs and building a resilient workforce. Urcher isn't just workwear, it's a culture of respect, resilience, and results. When you contact Urcher, mention Wilson 360 and Zach and his team will take well care of you.
What would be a typical, an easy win for you if somebody came along and said, hey, I want to potentially try this, some type of a task? What would be an easy win that they would maybe look at to start building that trust?
Yeah, so I think the two easy places are, one is with contract entry. If there is an acquisition, contract renewals, if you're a residential business and you're sending out these contracts and have different services, that's one space. Secondly, I think the invoicing, collections, and that process is one where we can be successful. So if you can rely on your teams to complete work tickets, to complete work, and then invoice after that, taking that AR burden off of folks is something that we've done very successfully a number of times. And AR practices generally, they vary from company to company about when you should send a statement, when you should call, those sorts of things, but that's pretty easy. But the core process of sending out an invoice, following up in a friendly manner, dealing with credits or other document requests, which is usually the reason that people don't pay, are all things that are kind of boxed in and easily solvable. And there's not like an infinite number of answers. Like I think we've been very successful at helping people with like enhancement designs, but there isn't a right answer with an enhancement design. There might be 100 right answers. So that's a lot tougher of a task to do and have a quick win,
right?
Versus accounts receivable, remittance application, that sort of thing, where there's not that many right answers. There's usually just one.
How do you handle the retraining, the retooling of people that perhaps maybe their jobs or current functions are outsourced? But you could even go to the extreme of, there's a lot of owners I come across who potentially go down that exit path because they're just exhausted. They've been working for 100 hours a week for the last 10 years. So they finally think that, I'm exhausted, I want to sell. But often, them being able to release a lot of those pressures, they could obviously get re-energized and maybe they're back out doing something they were originally passionate about, going out selling work, talking to people. And that's never happened in the last, 10 years or so. So how do you make that type of transition?
So the second one's super easy, right? You're helping them out. They're figuring out the time. You're just going to be seen as an asset. We have a number of customers where that's, been the case. I think the first one is a real challenge. Now, I will say this. Most of the folks that we work with, even if in this administrative sort of task replacement, they've worked with the landscaper for a number of years. They have a lot of knowledge. They may not know the knowledge, but they have knowledge of customers, they have knowledge of vendors, they have knowledge of the industry, where to search for leads. They know these things. And by freeing them up from those tasks, that's generally where, we've tried to say and help them get more comfortable. Generally, with the folks who are in these admin roles, they want to have more of a customer facing role. They want to be in business development. They want to do design work. And so, this helps them get there. But in cases where they didn't know they wanted to do those things, when you start to free up and show them all the knowledge that they've gained over the years, and it's direct knowledge, it's in person that, can't ever be offshored or automated by a computer. That's the stuff that I think that can be embraced and really be a value creator for themselves and for the company.
What sort of successes have you seen? You've been working with companies for a period of time now. What are some of the major transformations you've seen?
So probably the biggest transformation we've seen are where we've really improved the velocity of a response. So there's a lot of examples, but one I'll pick is with the RFP process. So previously, with one of the clients we worked with, the business development people were responsible for prospecting, but then they were also responsible for generating the estimates. And so they'd be out meeting with people, prospecting, trying to gather in leads, and then their quote unquote admin work would be creating the estimates and delivering them. And inevitably, they would start to fall behind and sometimes miss deadlines, or sometimes when it's an unsolicited sort of bid, right? You're meeting a community or you're a commercial building or a residential customer, and they're not doing a formal RFP. Getting them the proposal as fast as possible really does improve your chances to get a yes. And so where we've seen one of the bigger impacts is just the velocity of turning around an estimate in 24 hours or 48 hours if it's a bit more complicated, because we can work off hours. So if someone's prospecting and doing work until 4 or 5 o'clock at night, and then turn it over to us to spend the next 12 hours generating the proposal, and then they can take it and deliver it from there. That's been a real wow factor, and I think helped measurably get additional wins because their velocity is just faster. And I think velocity doesn't always win, but if you get that consumer and you pitch them on a enhancement to their front entryway, when they hear that from you, when they're excited about the vision you've painted for them, that's the time to get the proposal in front of them, not when they have their family, their job, everything else distracting them. And now they got to try to remember what you told them a week ago. By that time, it's a lot harder to say yes. And so by increasing that velocity, I think we really saw an improvement of pull through and work that they delivered.
Yeah.
Or I guess I shouldn't say delivered, and then were accepted and then they won.
No, I agree with 100%. If somebody is hot and ready to buy, then, let's get that turnaround, same day, 24 hours max. Now, I'm assuming that there would need to be some type of work done on the back end to make sure that, the templates are in place, the estimates are in place, measurements are done accurately. There's some type of a template for proposals. So, I assume that's all the due diligence your team would do.
That's right. Yeah,
in order
absolutely.
to get that velocity there.
And we kind of adopt what we sometimes call like a 10-80-10 approach, which is the person up front is going to do 10% of the work, define, hey, here's the property, here's the boundaries. Hey, it's hard to tell, but the pond basins are really steep, or it's hard to tell, but there are a lot of these small fences in the backyard. So you can only use a 30-inch deck, not a 60-inch deck mower, things like that. Then we're going to do 80% of the work, do takeoffs, use production rates, do renderings if appropriate, provide it back to that person by that next morning. And then they do the last 10% and just make sure, does this make sense in the context of what I saw? Yes, it does. Okay, we're good to go. Or hey, make these tweaks. So, we're not there. I would say in most companies, that's not fair. In a lot of companies, the estimators aren't there either. You got to have that shared responsibility to get you base information and then confirm what you thought you were supposed to do was what they needed you to do.
If anybody's sort of thinking about going down this direction, what would be the best way for them to, maybe dip their toe in to try and figure out, what options do I have in front of me?
Yeah, the best way to do is just have a conversation with me. We can talk through business processes that may not be working the way you want. Maybe your receivables aging is not where you want. Your lead gen isn't where you want, but compare your current challenges to some of the things that we provide. And we can kind of figure out if there's a place to work together or not relatively quickly in that conversation.
Have you seen any types of companies work better than others, whether it be residential, commercial, design builds, anything you've seen work better than others?
I think that where the work is a bit more predictable we work better in terms of like helping with the estimating. If you're doing a true one-off construction drawing, heavy irrigation, high-end sort of construction work, that we don't have experts in construction. We don't have experts in irrigation. And so we can help, but we're not going to be able to take a heavy lift off someone versus if, you're serving 1,000 residential customers, then your service that you're going to provide is relatively similar. If you're doing 200 enhancements a year, your service is going to be consistent. If you're a golf course architect and you're designing a one-off golf course, maybe we help you a little bit, but that's not going to be as easy to help.
Cool. Joe, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you, find out a little bit more about you, the company?
Yeah, so either reach out and give me a call, 330-730-0807, or shoot me an email at joe-iafigliola at process. It's actually a horrible URL actually, but process-smart.biz. So that's the best way. We actually are number one usually for SEO for Process Smart. So if you search Process Smart up, we'll pop up at the top.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Joe, well, thank you for your time today. It's great sharing your new ideas and concepts, and hopefully people will reach out to you. So thank you.
All right, Robert. Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay. Cheers. Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Commercial Landscaper podcast. I hope you're walking away with some great nuggets that you can immediately apply to your business, whether you're in leadership, operations, or you just want to show up every day with that Iron Man mindset. Remember, growth doesn't happen by accident. It happens with intentional moves, bold conversations, and surround yourself with the right people. If you found value today, subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with others. And again, don't forget to check out wilson-360.com. We have digital courses from account management, operational excellence, leadership development, or some of the other coaching packages we offer. Anyway, huge shout out to our sponsors. Thank you very much. And I'll leave with this. Have a pure, dead, brilliant day.